Hello and welcome to the Post Talk Podcast, the podcast where we interview post-production professionals in the film industry. Today I am joined with Jason Bowdach. He's a colorist and finishing artist. Jason's color and finishing work spans the gamut from commercial projects for clients such as Adobe and Google, independent feature films, and immersive VR experiences seen all around the globe. Today I will be talking with Jason about building a color grading reel, as well as also talking about his pixel tools power grades. This is Jason Bowdach. I'm here with Jason Bowdach. Correct me if I'm saying that correctly, Jason. Your last name.
You
there.
got it.
Oh, perfect.
It's like Kodak with a B.
Oh, okay, nice. I made sure I spelled it correctly too.
You nailed it.
Awesome. First question. I mean, it's the general question we always got to ask. How did you get started as a colorist?
It's one of those, like, I'm not going to call it an accident, but it's something that I certainly didn't start as a colorist. I actually thought I was going to be a visual effects artist. And it's funny that we were just talking about before and after stills. That's something that I really enjoyed. I loved seeing how much, for when I was in high school and I was a film student of DVD extras, like a lot of people are, I really enjoyed seeing visual effects before and afters. It's something that just blew me away and how much of an effect they had on movies. Mm-hmm. So I left high school and college thinking that I was going to be a VFX artist, and I already had a pretty good grasp of After Effects and I want to say a medium to low to medium education level of compositing. And so I start to jump in and I leave college around 2009. And if anybody knows what's going on in 2009, the visual effects industry is not in a good place. In fact, most of our industry is not in a good place. Mm-hmm. And so I quickly realized that this was not going to work with me. And so I took a look at what, we were just talking about, I took a step back and I said, what do I really like about this art form? What do I really enjoy about this? Is it the compositing? Is it the matching? Is it putting in things that didn't exist there? And what I really started to realize that I enjoyed was actually when the client came in and saw, they're like, can you show me what we had before? Can you show me what we had afterwards? And I really enjoyed their reaction more than anything else. It was sort of an innate, dopamine pleasure that I got. It was like, wow, that's amazing. And can you show me that again? Turn it on and off. And I'm not sure exactly if it was right then, but I clicked essentially that was also something you can get from color grading. And this massive amount of change that you can get from inflicting mood. I basically sat down and did a little bit of more analysis of that, and I also figured out that I liked the change in mood. I liked the control, almost unconscious that you had over the viewer. I liked working in Cinema 4D and After Effects and adding things that weren't there. Those were really cool, but I think it was really that final compositing color grade that I really enjoyed. In fact, I found myself getting lost in it and almost spinning my wheels and coming up with 3 or 4 or 5 looks and never being able to decide which one I liked best. And that's when I realized that maybe I should approach color grading a little bit. And so that's sort of what led me down that path a tiny bit. And so right around 2014, I started to approach color grading seriously enough that I decided to do it professionally as freelance colorist.
I do hear what you're saying about the before and afters. I've had one client refer to it as, hey, can do it like an eye doctor office, or give me like a 1 and a 2.
It's a little bit like that. It's like I've had some people call it like seeing the light. It's a very interesting sort of experience, especially when you're in control of it, and it's highly unique. Especially in the filmmaking process. Most of filmmaking is behind the sheet, and you can't really see anything, and it's not until the end, and even then it's like, oh, well, I was involved with that. But there's something sort of innately controlling about color grading. And again, it wasn't necessarily that I could do this. I just really liked this. I'm holding this panel, I'm holding the surface, and I can quickly make it warm, I can quickly make it cool, and that as I'm watching it, as I'm seeing it, and we're seeing this more in HDR now, physically, that all of a sudden, I can't feel that at this really cool scene or this really dark scene, all of a sudden I have to feel a certain way, or my body is being forced to feel a certain way. And that just felt so amazing. And then when I started to see how much depth there was to it, that there was, they used to say, like, it took 10,000 hours to master a craft. And I looked at this and I saw how long it took to shot match and how long it took and how much depth there was. And I saw hundreds of thousands of hours. And I was like, great, there is way more than a career in color grading. This is so amazing. Mm-hmm. And this was right around the time I think DaVinci 10 or 11 was coming out. And so it was just it was a combination of prime time too.
Right. Oh, yeah, very, very cool. Yeah, I'm a newbie, right? So I'm coming in at DaVinci 16, you know. But it is cool to hear about that time, and also hearing the duties that, you know, the colorist has. It's you're in charge of obviously color grading, of course, the images, but also having the interaction with the client, which I'm hearing more and more is the most important part, you know.
That's a super, super important part that, again, it's really difficult to express, and it's really more difficult because it doesn't come along reliably unless you have a very specific client that likes to come in. But it just, all of a sudden, one day in your career, somebody's going to come along and says, hey, I want to see this, can we work on this? And it's a difficult thing to be prepared for, and it is a part of the client experience, and it's not something that you can learn in YouTube videos. It is part of your personality, and I've definitely been let go of a job because a client was just not clicking with me, and it's not her fault, it's not my fault, it's probably more my fault for not working with her because she is the client and I am the colorist,
right?
And I'm supposed to be working with her vision, but it was my inexperience at the time of not being able to grasp that. And just going, hey, this is color grading. This is what your footage allows me to do and not allows me to do. And not being able to explain that in a way that she could understand that clearly. And it was funny because the more and more I get experience, the more and more I feel less sour about that job. And her inability to understand that.
Interesting. I think for a lot of directors, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, when you come in or whenever you hit up a colorist for the first time, whether it's in pre-production or you're getting ready in post, it's good to always bring in reference stills, but also understand what the reference stills are already doing and how they were graded, you know, like with soft contrast, dark contrast, like a lot of it, or a lot of saturation or a little bit of saturation. Like I think little things and knowing those concepts go a long way with communicating with the colorist.
I think it's super important, and actually a lot of people get afraid, or a lot of people get reserved when they have a director or a DP that comes in with a little bit of knowledge. And I don't necessarily think you need to get concerned about that. I like to use that. What you need to understand, though, is they may not be communicating in the same language as you are. So they may be communicating, they may be used to Lightroom, they may be used to something else, or they may be just using a different word than whether it's actually technically true. Like, that's a big issue with me. I'm a scientifically correct kind of guy. I like to call things the way that they are. Trust me, I've definitely had some relationship issues with that. And I like to call, when you're bringing down the highlights, you're bringing down the highlights. When you're bringing up the shadows, you're bringing down the shadows. If you're going to call something warm, I like it warm. And my clients may not call it that. They may say, I want this to feel sexy. I want this to feel lovely. I want this to feel romantic. There may be used a variety of different words, and it's my job as a colorist to interpret that. Is lovely and romantic two different forms of red? Are they different saturations? Does that mean a luminance change? How does that relate to the actual scene that I'm working with right now?
Right.
And that's a huge, that actually has been 2/3 of my career, other than working with the image, is understanding what they're talking about. And the more challenging part, how can we communicate a discrepancy in my inability to completely grasp what you're talking about?
That often I've been hearing a lot is there's sort of with grading, and I'm sort of struggling with it as well. You're saying you are a very technical person, and that's a good thing. But also, some colorists aren't very technical, and they only focus on the creative. Do you think it's important to have that balance of both? moving forward in one's career, not to sway too much to one way or the other, or what would you think?
I think there are two different types of colorists, and I think it's important not to some colorists have a background in visual effects. Some come from a background in telefilm. Some, it depends on where you come from. I think it's important not to judge yourself and say, I must go learn Nuke or Fusion and really understand every aspect of the pipeline. I don't necessarily think that's crucial. There's a ton of commercial colorists that know just enough about image transformation and just to be dangerous, and they make gorgeous looking images, and they can shot match 3 times faster than me. But at the same time, when it comes to diagnosing image issues, when I bring a project in and this image is, every time this camera comes up, there is a weird issue in the highlights. Sure, I could probably grade that out, which happens quite a lot, but there probably is an issue with innate color management that if I could solve that, I wouldn't have to deal with it for each single shot.
Yeah.
And that happens quite a bit for me. Like, for instance, at Fox, we deal with footage that's crushed quite a bit, and they're air copies, so they should look perfect. But what's happening? Well, it's being pushed through 3 or 4 or 5, I have no many idea, different workflows that I'm not able to track. And if I were able to track it, I could probably go through and figure out, okay, it's going from 2.4 to 1.96, and we can do a reverse transformation, blah, blah, blah. If you're able to essentially technically figure out what's going on, you can apply that reverse with the color transform. You're able to solve it on a systems level. Right. But what a lot of colorists do, and this is what I have to do at my work, is essentially just grade it out. And that's something that I like to move away from, because a lot of these problems can be solved on the workflow or the higher level. And that solves the problem either permanently, or that solves the problem in a way that we can continue to save that fix over, and we don't have to continue to recreate that.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Awesome. So earlier we were talking about branding oneself as a colorist, right? And we kind of dabbled a little bit into talking about before and afters, which I think is a debate I hear often, right? I don't want to do any before and afters, or some people are like, oh, I'll do a couple, or there's even or don't show log, which is what I've heard a lot. What is your take on it?
So I have stayed out of those conversations, specifically because of what you've seen on my website, mainly just because I haven't updated it yet. Mm-hmm. But my opinion has changed. So my opinion was, when I got into this, was I wanted to show log because that's what was captured. My opinion has changed pretty drastically. My opinion is that I want to show, and as soon as I get a chance to do website update, you'll see that everything will change pretty drastically. Mm-hmm. What I want to change is I'm going to go completely to 709 color managed befores.
Okay, nice.
And that's because nobody's looking at log. The only people that are looking at log are people in this room. And that's because, people in this room, other colorists, people that are technicians, that are looking at image. Do I need to raise it? Do I need to lower it? A couple IREs, a couple points. And it's because we're doing technical adjustments to this. Most people are looking at a 709 adjusted, and especially when we're trying to judge creative work, no one's looking at your website or my website or any colorist website going, how good of a technician are they? That's just not how it works. They're looking to go, okay, he's in this room. I was looking at Luke Cahill's website last night and looking, man, this guy makes gorgeous images. And in fact, he makes consistently gorgeous images. That's what somebody's looking at a colorist website for.
Yeah.
And not that, okay, he can consistently transform from log to a Rec 709 like decently. That's not really what people are looking colorists for. They're looking for, can he consistently make gorgeous looking images? No one actually at this point cares whether it's Rec 709 or log. What I was going for originally was, well, producers are going to hire me and they want to know that I could do that. Well, everything is shot in log or linear or some type of raw now. So the fact is, what I was aiming for originally is completely moot at this point.
Nice. That's very good to hear. Yeah, I was going through my reel and I was kind of curious. I was like, I could do wipes, but then again, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know.
You certainly can do wipes. I'm not against wipes in any form, but because I mean, there's some drastic changes that some people done, and you can feel free to show that and do it somewhat quickly. You don't need to do like 12 wipes,
Right.
but do it from a 709 color managed image, not from a log image, because that's going to realistically show what you've done, as opposed to, okay, he went from log to Rec 709, and now at least you're able to show, here's what I did. I did some major curves, I did some contrast changes, I did some focus adjustment, and you probably won't be able to see it on a reel, but I added some texture too.
Okay, yeah. But if you were to do wipes, you could maybe do like, there's a look 1 or a look 2, sort of thing, or like, I can show these different variations. I can do different types of looks, maybe something like that along those lines.
Exactly.
Okay.
And here's for looks. I'm more fond of, at least if you're going to do wipes, I'm less fond of, and this is mainly because what I've seen on Facebook and some other groups, I'm less fond of different looks and more fond of different parts of one look. Show me how you built up the one look. Because what I see, at least what goes through my mind, and this may be different for other people, and of course this may be different for somebody hiring a colorist, but what I think when you're showing me different looks is you just applied a bunch of different looks and put this on your reel, as opposed to this came from an actual job.
Right. Okay.
And don't get me wrong, I've certainly I have some stock shots from a spec marketing thing that I've graded too, but I don't think that I want to put it in a reel and advertise, by the way, here's 5 different looks that I did from scratch for it. You're almost advertising that this isn't a real shot. Like, there's certainly times when people will add a slightly different look to a shot than the client chose for their reel, but I don't think that they'll put 5 of them on there.
Right. Don't need to go too crazy.
Yeah.
I wanted to also, on your website, you are a colorist/finishing artist. And that's something I really wanted to touch base on, which is very good to note. What is the difference between a colorist and a finishing artist, if there are any?
There's definitely some differences. It's a more recent term. I want to say in like the last 5 or 6 years. So finishing artist is evolved from online editor, and it's sort of combined a little bit. Finishing artist involves VFX. So basically, one of the things that I do is I fully conform the timeline. We transform any combinations of, there's some air copy shots, there's obviously some shots that are shot in log, so we're doing the full color. And then we're doing some, like, I want to call it basic VFX. We're not doing major rotoscoping, we're not doing like crowd simulations, we're not doing anything like that. Right. I'm talking like minor paint outs, some lens flares, some minor graphics. Just, we're doing more stuff in the bay than we might be doing previously, and we're trying to keep it in the bay, in the color bay, as much as possible, instead of going to, say, flame or to nuke or to, I mean, now we can go to fusion, but I try and keep it out of fusion if possible.
Right.
And so it's just additional type of finishing tweaks on top of it. So, for instance, I had to on a behind the scenes BTS promo the other day, I had to paint out, there's like 4 holes in a wall and a radiator and carpet, and I had to paint out all of that and basically recreate the back wall.
Okay.
So that's the type of finishing artist type of work.
Okay, nice. And so that's kind of how it differs from the colorist role, of course.
Exactly. So it's it involved a little bit of compositing, a little bit of VFX, a little bit of color on top of that, and then essentially finishing that all together, because I was also the one that actually delivered the final deliverables for that as well. So that doesn't always work like that. Sometimes there is assistance with that as well. Right. But for the work that I'm doing, I'm handed, I don't do graphics, I don't do audio. I'm given essentially the final graphics and the final audio, and I essentially just drop it in there and then do final checks on all of that. So I'm the last set of eyes on this deliverable. So I'm checking final levels. I'm checking, do the graphics, are they broadcast safe? I'm making sure they're in the right place. Are they in title safe? I am making sure for Facebook and Snapchat, are they the right aspect ratios? Is everybody's head in the right place? If there's a graphic rating for the television version? Is it on anybody's head? Weird things like that.
Yeah. I would say that is super important, especially nowadays where I'm noticing a lot of like misorganization sometimes with projects at times. You know, there's sometimes always there's going to be something at the very end, or the director's like, oh, I wish I could have changed that, you know, or whatever it could be.
It's very, very organization centric, and just sort of keeping notes and making sure, especially if you're doing multiple versions, like for promos and commercials, there can be 6 to 12 different versions. So it's, especially if there's a change, it's all about making sure that you have an organized workflow and you're just making that change pretty consistently throughout. Otherwise, you're gonna have a mess. And that's actually, I mean, a lot of people ask, like, why do we still do features and reels? That's why a lot of people still do features and reels, because it's easy to go back and say, let's fix this on reel 2, and then you don't have to render out the whole feature again.
Speaking of that, I came across a Facebook post, and it was this screenshot of the Justice League finished timeline. You know, the 4-hour Zack Snyder thing.
Yeah.
I was like, there's no way that you load this up and you're just sitting there waiting for hours for this whole timeline, you know, just to render it. There's no way. They had to do reels, you know. But everyone's like in awe over it, you know. What do you think about something like that long?
So I think it goes both ways. I've recently been learning a lot more about Avid, and I mean, remember, they're working with offline media in that specific segment,
right?
But especially with color, they're also, when they're working with the final offline media, they're also probably not working with the raw media. They're working with debayered, either OpenEXR or DPX. Very, very, actually for this one is almost for sure OpenEXR. So they don't have to debayer raw media like a lot of us do, and that's a huge, huge process. So that's a huge step that whatever computer they're working with doesn't have to do. Now, they have this massive storage that they have to deal with, but remember, they're a large facility, so that's not a big problem for them. So their software can certainly do it. I think it's much more of an organizational choice than it is a software choice. Like, can the software handle it? I think with a picture that big and with that many changes, you almost absolutely want to split that into reels so that you can have multiple shifts and multiple artists working on it. Otherwise, you're going to have... actually, no, I'm going to go back on my previous statement. You're going to have some software conflicts because you're going to have people wanting to access the same sequence and making changes to it, and it's going to be locked.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So it's a different part of the software limitation, but basically it's not going to freeze up and crash if you have enough resources, which the studio working on it and the post facility working on it does. But it's going to cause an organizational limitation, meaning that you can be more efficient by having multiple shifts working on it. But you're not going to be able to do that with a single sequence.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, that's good. I'm glad we touched base on that, because I was a little confused. I have heard that, you know, before, seen in the roll credits, you know, finishing artist, and now we're also touching base on this as well. And it's good to touch base on these things that way, because I so many people were just like, how are they editing all in that one timeline? And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, no, I don't think that's what they're doing.
I mean, like, I'll say this, and I've watched our post industry become very, very good at becoming social media centric in the last couple of years. We eat this stuff up, man. We want to see it in one reel, and they need it to sell their software. It probably was edited in one reel, or at one point edited in one reel, or at least put in one reel for the screenshot. That's what I'll say, and that's not a bad thing,
right?
What do you think we do when we take 8 shots of before and afters and put them in an Instagram shot? That's not how they are in the timeline.
Right.
We're setting it up for social media.
You're dressing it up. So one of the things, as we're sort of nearing the end here, wanted to touch base on Pixel Tools. Let's touch base a bit on what Pixel Tools is and how it can be beneficial for colorists.
Awesome. So Pixel Tools are power grade presets for DaVinci Resolve. And if you don't know, power grade presets are basically DaVinci Resolve's version of presets, essentially a preset made of tool setup that you can use to either save and recreate your grades. And we have a volume 1 collection of 120 different grades and utilities that you can use to quickly recreate or basically create your own custom grades. And we were working really, really hard on a new set of film emulation, both negative and positive emulations that I'm hoping, I don't want to say when they're coming out, but we're about to enter a beta. I'm really, really excited for them. They're completely developed in a scene referred workflow. If you have any interest in beta testing, feel free to shoot me an email. I'm always looking for more beta testers. The more people that I get these in the hands of and working on footage, the better that they end up in. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I can test them on 20, 40, 60 shots, but if somebody uses it on a shot and it looks like crap, obviously it's not tested enough. Yeah. But basically, they're presets that you can use in Resolve, but more importantly, you have complete customization over absolutely everything that I've done in them, and you have complete transparency over what I've done.
Yeah, I do like the idea of you're sort of pushing and selling these power grades instead of where the popular trendy thing is to sell LUTs, right? And that's what everyone's go-to thing is. But I do like this much better as you're pushing power grades. I think it's much more efficient.
Efficient. I think I really like your choice of words there. Mm-hmm. Efficient. I think it's definitely perfect for Resolve. Obviously, it doesn't translate necessarily to other platforms as well, but I really it sticks with sort of my ethos, which is it's color centric and it's not really disingenuous. My whole thing, and that you can hear it in my tone and my energy, is that I love color. I love talking about it. I love teaching others about it, and I love making things faster and easier. Inefficiency sucks. Nobody likes it. And so I started to develop these for myself, essentially. Mm-hmm. But the more and more I worked on them, the more and more I realized like this could get better and better. And then I started asking people about it and getting input. And it just seemed like everybody should have this. And it just made no sense to just develop it for myself. And I wanted input, and then this is sort of what it evolved into. And I think one of the more important parts, and I think something that is a little bit different than lookup tables, and I think one of the things that really encourages me to continue developing it, and you can't get this from developing closed source products, is that I love hearing from people saying, man, I love whatever power grade. And even more, I loved opening it up and seeing what you did inside of it. I learned so much from that. And that just makes me smile. Like, that makes my day.
Nice. Well, to anyone listening, if you guys are interested in looking into Pixel Tools, I will leave a link in the description to the website, and you can shoot Jason a message and sending him, some of the things that you have done or checked it out and all that sort of stuff. So to wrap up here for the podcast, last question: what are some good websites and some good links for people that are younger or starting out in color who are trying to learn? What are some good websites for people to go to?
So I'm going to actually start that up before providing any links and say that there is a ton of poor information out there, and that you will actually spend a lot of time unlearning that information. So as great as YouTube seems, I would suggest away from using YouTube. If you've ever heard of the concept of you can learn by teaching, it's really, really proven by YouTube. And
yeah,
unfortunately, when you're trying to learn something as complex as color grading, you'll find a lot of, I'm not going to call them bad actors, but I'm going to call them, you want to learn from a professional. You want to learn, you wouldn't go to university and just go outside and ask your neighbor to teach you rocket science.
Right.
And yes, you can learn coloring from Adobe Premiere from almost anybody, but would you really want to? Your time is worth a lot, and I think people undervalue their time now. A couple of places, it depends. If you want to learn generic color grading, there's a bunch of great sources on lynda.com for just sort of generic color grading if you're working in Premiere or Final Cut. Those taught by great trainers. If you're looking for specifically about like learning Resolve, I highly recommend Warren Eagle's new course on FX PhD. I definitely recommend, if you're looking for an ongoing training resource, highly recommend Mixing Light. I do have to mention I am a contributor there, but I don't get anything ongoing. It's just a great, great resource for trainers There's not really many sources out there like that. I also recommend Low Post.
Mm-hmm.
And then Color.training, COLURO.training.
Perfect.
For some ongoing courses as well. So it's absolutely worth paying for a course. You will spend the money in your time that you will spend for $100 or $200 courses. Oh, and last but not least, Ripple training.
Oh yes, mm-hmm. That's a good one.
Between those, and if you have a budget of $100 for training, you'll be off to a great start with any of these websites.
Perfect. Well, Jason, I want to say thank you so much for having a nice chat with me on the podcast. I'm going to go ahead and open up the stage a bit for anyone in the audience that does want to hop on. Again, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I just want to say thank you again for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure.